So I guess we can start. So welcome everyone to our 18th YPIC webinar. Today we will have Tim Van Den Bossche, so Dr. Tim Van Den Bossche here, and he is a postdoctoral researcher at Compomics Lab at the University of Ghent. And he completed his PhD in 2022, and he also received the YPIC Best PhD Thesis Award in 2023 for his thesis in 2022. Yeah, and he's very into the field of metaproteomics, and there's also a co-founder and co-administrator of Metaproteomics Initiative. So we are already, so this is the really nice part, the academic part that he has, but he has also now some really nice research about the address to the transgressive behavior at academic institutions. So for everyone who didn't read his paper, it is really, really interesting, but we will now anyway hear more about it. So we are all really excited to hear more. So to actually also advertise a few future events that we have. So of course we have the YPIC 2025 in this June, and you can still early bird register until the 10th of March. And there's also still the application open for travel grants until the 28th of February. And also you can still apply for the YPIC Awards, where the application deadline is now extended to the 16th of March. So if you want to apply for some of these, you can just scan now this QR code or just go on YPIC.org. And then also really important upcoming events is this YPIC Open Lab Day. It is, I think, on Monday, so February 25th. Join this. It's really, really cool. So you will learn more about the proteomics core facilities. And then we have also on the 26th of March, our early career researcher day. You can also still send in short 3-minute videos for the Science Slam, and you can win a travel grant for up to 1,000 euros. So really, really cool. And also today is the last day to register for our YPIC annual proteomics gathering. So if you're around Athens or you want to join us, please feel free to register. So the event is free, but of course you have to travel there. And there should be also soon a new YPIC episode on our podcast. So also stay there tuned. And then we are now really looking forward to hear more from you, Tim. Sorry for the end. Also, if you have any questions, please send the questions to me. We will ask them at the end. We just don't want to have it very crowded. So please send the questions to me and they will be asked.
All right. Yeah, thank you for this nice introduction, Louisa. So I'll try to share my screen. Let's see if this works. All right.
Perfect. We see it.
Does this work? Okay, I'm going to minimize also the screen. So if there's anything you would like to mention, please just speak up. So yeah, first of all, thanks for inviting me here and to talk about this very important topic, how to address transgressive behavior in academia. I will present some insights from the research we did. So as Luisa already mentioned, it's not going to be about metaproteomics today. So I know I talk a lot about metaproteomics, and rightfully so. It's an amazing field. I talk about the tools to develop and also a lot about the Metaproteomics Initiative. So now, why am I the right person to talk about addressing transgressive behavior? Well, I represented ECRs in the Board of Governors at Ghent University for 4 entire years. Now, what is the Board of Governors? The Board of Governors is the highest governing body and as such holds full decision-making and administrative authority. So the board also determines the academic and administrative organization of the university. Now, the daily governance of the university consists of the director, the vice rector, and the administrators. And then together with the Board of Governors and the executive board, they form the management of Ghent University. But as a researcher, you're affiliated with a faculty led by a dean. And the faculty is divided in departments, which consist of unofficial research groups, like, for example, compomics. Now, why am I telling you this? Bottom line, whatever is decided at the boards will impact everyone at Ghent University. And as a board member, I decided early onwards that addressing such behavior and aiming to create a supportive academic environment was one of my key priorities for those 4 years. In the beginning, this was quite difficult, but this gained some momentum after March 2022, but more about that later. Okay, before we go any further, there's an important disclaimer. I am not a psychologist, not a sociologist, not a social science researcher whatsoever. I'm a bioinformatician, and nor did I ever experience transgressive behavior myself in my research group, which is a question, yeah, I also often get asked because I'm working on this topic. It's rather the opposite. I am and forever will be my PhD supervisor, Leonard Martens, always grateful for the opportunities he provided me during my PhD and my postdoc. He also allowed me, by the way, to invest a lot of time in this topic and represent ECRs at the Board of Governors, which by itself took a big chunk of my research time. All right. So, first of all, why is it important to address transgressive behavior? First of all, ECR mental health is in decline. So in the 2019 Nature survey, it turns out that over 36% of all respondents have sought help for anxiety or depression caused by their PhD studies. Not only that was basically global, but then similar studies have been held in Belgium, UK, US, and the Netherlands. Secondly, there's mental health issues, they drive lower individual performance. So there's an increased dropout rate at our university, for example. 300 PhD candidates per year do not re-enroll. There's, of course, also a loss of talent. So this increased turnover due to the poor workplace culture leads to more recruitment and also training costs, knowledge lost, and decreased innovation. And obviously, there's also lower productivity. So employees in toxic work environments, they exhibit reduced motivation, lower engagement, and higher rates of burnout, all of which impact also the outputs. And thirdly, maintaining such a negative working culture is also very costly. So, for example, in the UK's NHS, the workplace bullying and harassment costs over 2 billion pounds per year, primarily due to absenteeism, presenteeism, and staff turnover. At Ghent University, each loss awarded PhD costs us 7,000 euro per year per student in direct research funding. Now, look at all these citations, 2019, 17, 2017. These are all pretty old. So is it actually still present? Well, in March 2022, the VRT, so the Flemish TV, they aired the panel documentary Macht misbruikt, which exposed systemic power abuse in academia. So the investigation revealed that this is not about isolated incidents. Some professors, they had over 20 complaints against them, and still the universities, they failed to take meaningful action. And this pattern was not only seen at Ghent University, but also at KU Leuven, suggesting a broader structural issues. One of the key issues and insights from the documentary is that the subtle forms of bullying, such as intimidation, exclusion, and excessive pressure, are often harder to address than an overt abuse like physical aggression or public humiliation. Turns out that victims struggle to prove their experiences, and universities frequently dismiss these cases as misunderstanding rather than serious misconduct. And even when complaints are formally acknowledged, they often get buried in slow, ineffective procedures. The documentary also highlighted how universities tend to protect prestigious professors rather than hold them accountable. So academics with high publication records, international recognition, and strong funding portfolios are often just seen as too valuable. So the reputation also really benefits the university. So as a result, misconduct is tolerated. And even when victims attempt to file complaints, they face a deeply flawed reporting system. So formal complaints are not anonymous, leaving PhD students and early career researchers afraid of retaliation. Yeah, many fear losing their supervisor support or just even their PhD, leading them to stay silent. And in some cases, even when they go for informal complaints, the reporting channels themselves, they actively discourage them from filing a formal complaint, warning them that if they would file a formal complaint, that could harm their future academic career. And yeah, even if you don't want to stay as a postdoc, you still want to get your PhD, so you remain silent. Now, beyond the fear of speaking up, the disciplinary procedures themselves, they lack independence. So at KU Leuven, for example, cases expire after just 1 year, making it nearly impossible to hold perpetrators accountable. And even when action is taken, it just often lacks real consequences. The documentary revealed that at UGent, a professor who had been sanctioned was banned from supervising PhD students. He still received in that time a promotion. So basically, the documentary exposed a massively flawed HR system where reputation takes priority over justice. The documentary, by the way, is still online. It's here in the left. It's in the left bottom. So you can watch it if you want to. Okay, so this was obviously a wake-up call for Ghent University and also for the Board of Governors. So to move forward, the board identified 4 priorities. So first of all, we saw the need to have a external reporting center, which means that if you file a complaint, you cannot only do this at the university, but also outside of the university. Secondly, we want to restructure the disciplinary committee to include more external members so that it does not, first of all, consist of only professors from your own university, but also from people outside university. Third, we decided to extend who receive active bystander training. That's a training where you learn skills to challenge unacceptable behaviors, including those which may have become normalized over time. And lastly, we decided that we need to become better at communicating our internal reporting centers. And these priorities, they were going to be coordinated by a steering group, Respectful Behavior, which reported directly to the Board of Governors and which had 5 working groups under it. So detection, prevention, remediation, sanctioning, and consolidation and monitoring. Now, why did we then also organize roundtable conversations? Well, initially, no pre and post-doc members were consulted. Not necessarily with bad intentions. It consisted initially only of experts, but we wanted to have a seat at the table as well, as every testimony in the documentary came from ECRs. So we felt we could provide a reality check. Now, once we got involved, the scope of the project appeared for us to be too narrow. So while it's good they were looking for better communication about internal reporting channels, we didn't believe this would solve the problem. Same with active bystander training. I mean, I think you can train first or second year PhD students on how to stand up against, for example, senior professors, but in problematic circumstances, they will not respond. And I also understand why. Moreover, Ghent University did already work on policies before, but why did they fail? We had, for example, a university-wide charter on PhD student-supervisor interactions. So how does it come that this charter does not take place in offices and labs? So the goal was to collect both positive and negative experiences, but we were going to focus on the negative ones. Why negatives? Well, because we wanted to know what we could do better. And Importantly, these roundtables were also not intended as a representative survey. So 120 colleagues showed up with more than 120 stories, but out of 7,000 PhD students at our university. So we do know that many professors have only good intentions, but once more, we wanted to learn how to improve the current situation. In contrast, by the way, we were also contacted by several PhD students who praised our efforts, but were too afraid to show up. So even after we guaranteed them absolute anonymity. And I mentioned this already, the testimonials were collected and qualitatively analyzed to identify structural problems, and therefore also to be able to make bottom-up recommendations to the Board of Governors. Yes, so in the end, we organized 11 roundtable conversations with in total 120 colleagues. We also did this in cooperation with all faculty ECR representatives, so we did not organize them only by ourselves, but we had help from many ECR representatives. And this was also supported by the doctoral school office, which represents Ghent University. It's very important. It was very important for us that organizing such roundtable conversations was not an us versus them problem. It's not we wanted to fight against university. No, we wanted with the university together try to solve this issue. And this resulted in the end in a 26-page long internal report providing the context of the study, but also the conclusions and bottom-up recommendations. And bottom-up is really key here. So it's we as ECRs mention what we think would help to change the situation, in contrast to the top-down solutions proposed, for example, by the Board of Governors. So what came out of these conversations? So the report is roughly divided into two parts. On the one hand, it were issues related to work environment and culture, and on the other hand, it was about addressing transgressive behavior. Now, regarding the work environment and culture, the most frequently mentioned issues that can be described as problems arising. My apologies. They can arise from the lack of clarity regarding the roles and responsibilities of ECRs. So problems resulting from unaddressed misconduct and unhealthy work practices, or issues stemming from the hierarchical culture within Ghent University. Additionally, it was also quite clear that many ECRs feel that there's too little feedback culture within our university. So sometimes this refers to the lack of feedback for PG students regarding their progress and performance, but there's also a lack of feedback for professors regarding their leadership and management styles. I'll give you some examples. So some of the issues that have come to light are just downright scandalous. So the report includes a case of a lab where international colleagues are deliberately isolated from their Belgian colleagues with the explicit goal of ensuring that the international colleagues are not contaminated by their Belgian colleagues' so-called lazy way of working, which means Belgian researchers take their legal holidays, and they did not want that international researchers did the same. The report also contains testimonials of female colleagues being shamed for being pregnant while they should work in the lab, and that could therefore also impact their PhD progress. It also contains testimonial of a female PhD student who suffered from a miscarriage, after which a supervisor demanded that she came back to work as soon as possible. Other problems are related to, for example, communication boundaries. So some supervisors prefer to contact their PhD students outside of working hours via WhatsApp or text, or they call them at night. Look, well, such practices, and of course there are many levels of that, some of them may be unproblematic for some, others feel that it crosses a boundary and they struggle to bring it up with their supervisors. In any case, all these issues collectively point to several HR-related issues at the university. Now, a second set of problems concerns transgressive behavior. In this regard, the report primarily focuses on the barriers to reporting such incidents. So many colleagues, they do not know where to turn, or they find the reporting system excessively confusing or too legalistic. So there's a widespread perception that reporting does not help because the university does not take action. And far too often, even our own reporting centers still advise against taking action, suggesting that filing a complaint could jeopardize your own career. And as a result, many PhD students and postdocs at our university are convinced that professors protect each other, even when clear issues arise. So the consequence of all this is that our colleagues distrust how our university handles cases of transgressive behavior. Now, it goes without saying that all these problems reinforce each other. All right. While this internal report addresses specific issues within Ghent University, but we also know that the big lines were not only relevant to our university, but to all academic institutions. So I know I worked in the context regarding this manuscript, I know I worked in the context of my university, but I believe that most academic institutions face similar challenges. Therefore, we wrote a manuscript containing our key recommendations. You can read the preprint over here with the QR code, and it will hopefully also be soon online on Nature Mental Health. It has been accepted today, so I hope by next week or within 2 weeks, you can also read the final version. So we grouped our bottom-up recommendations into 3 different categories. So first of all, it's very important to build a supportive supervisory culture. So fostering positive and supportive relationships between PhD students and supervisors is key to preventing issues before they escalate. Secondly, responding to misconduct. Even with strong supervisory structures, transgressive behavior can still occur. And to address such cases, institutions must ensure effective mechanisms for reporting and accountability. But then it's also important that institutions use these individual cases to improve institutional policies and prevention. And by systematically analyzing reports, institutions can identify recurring issues, address policy gaps, and basically refine strategies. And those can help build both a stronger supervisory culture, but also improve responding to misconduct. Now, to create a more supportive academic environment, we need to move beyond simply reacting to issues as they arise. So instead, we must focus on structural improvements that proactively prevent problems, and that's why we propose 5 recommendations to improve supervision and institutional support for ECRs. So one of the most effective ways to prevent issues is to establish clear expectations at the beginning of a PhD or a postdoc. So many conflicts arise from misunderstandings about workload, research progress, and responsibilities. If supervisors and researchers basically align their expectations from day one, they can prevent a lot of stress down the road. This also means that it's encouraging open, honest discussion about work-life balance, research goal, and professional development from the very start. Secondly, feedback should not only go one way. So from supervisors to researchers, we also need structured bidirectional feedback mechanisms. So this allows ECRs to voice concerns and offer input on their supervision experience, just as supervisors provide feedback on their research progress. So a structured system, such as regular check-ins or 360-degree feedback, ensures that both parties continuously improve their working relationship. Yeah, many professors, they become supervisors without formal leadership training. So while they may be excellent researchers, mentoring is a completely different skill set. And leadership training, that they can help supervisors to foster a healthier research culture, but also recognize signs of distress in their students and improve their ability to support them. Yeah, starting a PhD or postdoc can be overwhelming. I don't have to tell you that. But especially for international researchers who are unfamiliar with the academic culture of their institution. And a structured onboarding program ensures that new researchers understand institutional expectations, resources, and policies. Likewise, mentorship initiatives where experienced researchers guide new ones that can help reduce feelings of isolation and provide informal support beyond the supervisor-student relationship. Finally, individual researchers should not be left alone to navigate difficult situations. Institutions must introduce them to dedicated support structures, such as independent advisors, peer networks, and accessible reporting mechanisms. And when problems arise, the researchers need to know where to turn and feel confident that their concerns will be taken seriously. And I believe that by implementing these 5 strategies, we can shift from a reactive approach, so where we only address issues after they become crisis, to a more proactive approach that builds a healthier, more healthy research environment. Even with the best prevention strategies, transgressive behavior can still occur. And when that happens, researchers must have a safe, transparent, and effective systems for reporting and addressing these issues. However, many existing mechanisms, they fail to provide adequate support. So therefore, one of the things, and one of the first things we tackled here is addressing misconduct, is that the reporting mechanisms, they should be accessible, transparent, and independent. So if they even seem as if they're even perceived as biased or ineffective, ECRs simply won't use them. So the institutions basically need to ensure that these mechanisms are truly independent, accessible to all, and transparent in how they handle cases. So that also includes, by the way, a clear communication on the process, the protections for those who report, and also visible follow-up actions. Many ECRs hesitate to report misconduct due to the fear of retaliation, unclear procedures, or the belief that nothing will change. So to fix this, the institutions, they need to lower these barriers by ensuring anonymity where possible, offering multiple reporting pathways, and making sure that the process does not put the complainant at risk. Because a system that is too complicated or intimidating will only reinforce silence and inactivity. A disciplinary process should not be purely punitive. So, while accountability is important, institutions should also focus on restorative approaches that encourage behavioral change and institutional learning. So that means in resolving conflicts before they escalate, and also offering mediation or coaching where appropriate. And it's by fostering such a culture of accountability rather than fear, institutions can encourage open dialogue and constructive solutions. Yes, academic tenure tracking. I know that it's crucial for protecting research independence, but it should not shield against misconduct. And too often, senior faculty with tenure are protected from meaningful consequences. even when clear behavioral issues are identified. So institutions basically need to ensure that tenure does not exempt individuals from behavior accountability and that misconduct is addressed at all career levels, regardless of seniority. That also means, and there's also something I want to show with this report, it's not only PhD students, professors, I mean, this can happen at all career levels at university. So finally, many issues that escalate into serious misconduct, they could have been prevented if HR had been more proactive. So institutions, they need to address problems early rather than waiting for multiple reports or legal action. That means they have to identify patterns, they have to take they have to take complaints seriously from the start, and they have to ensure that HR teams have the authority and training to handle these cases effectively. So by making these changes, we can move basically away from a system where reporting is risky, ineffective, or just simply ignored. All right. In the last section, we believe that to truly improve academic culture, the institutions, they need to go beyond case-by-case interventions and take a systemic data-driven approach. So we need to analyze patterns of misconduct, listen to the researchers' experiences, and use that information to shape better policies. So here we listed 4 recommendations. Yeah, first of all, too often institutions, they treat each case of misconduct as an isolated incident. But in reality, many of these issues are part of a broader systemic problem. So by analyzing these reports over time, universities can identify patterns. So whether it's repeated issues within specific departments or weaknesses in institutional policies. And then this data should inform real policy improvements rather than just leading to individual disciplinary actions. Yeah, many ECRs that leave academia are doing it because of negative experiences. So think about the PhD students who drop out in year 3. Well, institutions rarely take the time to understand why. And anonymous surveys and structured exit interviews, they can reveal challenges that researchers face, so including toxic work environments, lack of support, and career barriers. And these insights are crucial for designing policies that address problems before they drive people out of academia. Now, collecting data by itself is not enough. So institutions, they must act on it. By consolidating feedback from multiple sources, universities can design targeted interventions. So for example, if multiple reports highlight poor supervision practices from a specific supervisor, that signals a need for better leadership training. And they could also go talking to them. And if specific barriers to reporting are identified, oops, my apologies. Yeah, and then the last point is moving beyond anecdotal evidence. So, oops, I'm sorry. Yeah, so in the end, oops, there's something wrong with this animation. Doesn't matter. I think in the end, with these recommendations, I think institutions, they can move beyond the short-term fixes and build a long-term strategy for improving academic culture. And this data-driven part is also very important aspect. All right. Yeah, systemic change in academia is challenging, slow, and often met with resistance. So while the need for reform is clear, making meaningful progress requires navigating a very complex landscape of institutional structures, political dynamics, and cultural barriers. So maybe let's break down why this process is so difficult. So universities are deeply hierarchical, slow-moving institutions in general, and resistance often comes from established power structures that benefit from maintaining the status quo. And even when policies are introduced, true cultural change requires more than just procedural adjustments. It requires a cultural shift, um, at basically all levels of academia and seniority level. And without this, reforms remain a surface level policy document and basically ineffective. And yeah, even when issues are then well documented, getting them onto the university, getting them on the agenda of university leadership is a battle in itself. So the political dynamics within universities mean that decision-making is often slow and subject to multiple layers of approval. Like in our case, repeated delays in discussing our project meant that discussions were postponed at multiple governance level before finally reaching the board of governors. So to push real change, it's crucial to frame that these issues are just not a local concern. It's part of a broader global academic challenge that requires urgent action. But then once a problem is acknowledged, the implementation presents another set of challenges. Bureaucratic and legal complexity often slow down reforms, with institutions hesitant to act decisively due to concerns over reputational damage or even legal risks. HR departments, they frequently struggle with enforcement, either due to a lack of resources or a reluctance to take strong actions against senior academics. And without proper oversight, policies risk becoming more like symbolic gestures than effective solutions. Now, despite these barriers, right, progress is possible. So by recognizing these challenges and proactively addressing them, we can push for a stronger and more effective institutional response that creates change in academia. All right. This will be probably one of the more important slides, maybe the most important slides. How can ECRs basically improve academia? One of the most impactful ways ECRs can drive change is by organizing and mobilizing within their institutions. So forming or joining existing PhD and postdoc councils allow ECRs to push for policy improvements. But also advocacy needs to be backed by evidence. So collect data and testimonials and show it to university leadership. At the same time, we must also hold institutions accountable by demanding clear and transparent reporting mechanisms. So many universities have policies in place, but if they are inaccessible or ineffective, they serve no real purpose. So engaging with leadership, HR, and ombudspersons is essential to ensure that policies are not just written documents, but also enforced in a way that leads to real action. And beyond policy, fostering a healthier research culture starts with how we support each other, checking in on colleagues, offering informal peer support, going for a coffee. Yeah, that can all really help. And yeah, finally, change doesn't happen in isolation. We can learn a lot from both the successes and failures of other institutions. So for example, you're all listening now to my story about how we did it against university. Please spread the word and take action as well. It's by connecting across universities and collaborating with ECRs, not only in Europe, but also globally, that we can really push for systemic reforms that go beyond any single institutions. And I truly believe that by doing this, we can all together form a more supportive academic environment. So I would like to end by thanking everyone involved. So first of all, I would like to thank Dries Bostien and Femke de Bakkere, my two colleagues in the Board of Governors, and Sean Max, head of doctoral school office. These are all, by the way, also the co-authors on the manuscript. I definitely want to thank all the over 50 ECR representatives at Ghent University for their organizational contributions to the roundtable conversations. I also would like to thank many academic and non-academic staff members, including university leadership and professors, for the insights and constructive discussions. Still, by the way, these discussions and implementation are still ongoing. Then, of course, most importantly, to the 120 early career researchers whose voices, experiences, insights, stories, they have been so invaluable to drafting this. And of course, I'd like to thank you for being here today and for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim, for this very insightful webinar that you gave us today that I'm pretty sure us as academics and just being international researchers, some of us that, yeah, perhaps we've just heard similar stories where, yeah, our colleagues could relate and us could relate. But yeah, this is the thing. This is not something that we hear actually a lot about. So this has definitely been very insightful. So thank you so much. And obviously you have invested a lot in that. So I think you're the perfect person that could talk about it. So yes, thank you. And yes, we have a couple of questions from the audience. Okay, the first question is, there are programs just like mental health first aider. Do you think those programs can help to prevent the quitting of those PhD students maybe?
And which programs are there, like mentoring programs or?
Yeah, like mental health or like something that perhaps like PhD students could seek that could maybe help them get it. Do you think it could be like a help for those PhDs?
Definitely. I'm sure it can be a help for those PhD students. I also recommend universities installing those programs, but it's also important to realize that that by itself will not be enough. So if, for example, the PhD students experiences transgressive behavior and it follows such a mentoring program or such a program, just giving the story by itself is not enough. The university or the institution, they should tackle it and address the problem by itself.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. Another question from the audience was, what do you think is a good approach within a group to address problems like lack of feedback, negative behavior, etc.? Should every group have a person communicating these problems to?
Well, ideally, what I believe. So one of the comments we also received is that professors, they don't want to have this administrative burden. And one of the parts I think is important in addressing that and the feedback culture is that the university basically also demands the professors to ask for feedback. That's something different. Like if as a PhD student you feel you must give feedback to your professor, but you're afraid of the supervisor's response, then that's rather difficult. I think the university should also encourage PIs, professors, to actively ask feedback from their group. I mean, this is also part of the culture of change, right? So you can write also in like policy documents, yeah, every PhD student has the right on feedback. That's true. But if there are very big issues with the supervisor, yeah, then it's very difficult for PhD students to go to because we do have a huge power dynamic. Like there's a very big power dynamic at universities, and you still want to get your PhD. So I think supervisors should be trained to also actively ask feedback.
I think it is also very important to have someone that you can go to in case also like you cannot communicate with your PI, because it is also like maybe it's not always the case that your PI is very open for that. So maybe having to have enforced follow-up every 6 months of a PhD student, perhaps like a survey to send to the uni about their experience where perhaps this is really encouraged in every institution, this can actually really help a lot already, because yeah, still if it's something not everyone is perhaps open about it, you know, so yeah, I agree.
Yeah, indeed. And I do think that, for example, surveys here might not be the best part. I think, for example, a more closely looking mentoring, doctoral advisory committee
Yeah.
could be very helpful in that as well.
Yeah. Another question is that you say you already mentioned that professors were actually caught on misbehaving, got only charged to not supervise PhD students anymore, but they were still able to get grants, etc. What do you suggest here would be the correct way?
Can you specify what you mean by that? So what is the correct way? So what you should do as a PhD student then in that moment?
So if I understood correctly, they mean, so yeah, so they have been, they got only charged to not supervise PhD students anymore, but they were still able to get grants, etc. So they were
Yeah.
able to still continue kind of their career. So what could have just
Yes,
been done
exactly.
instead? Yeah, if I
So
understood
in
correctly.
that particular case, that was one of the cases I showed from the panel documentary. So basically, the PI was not, or he could not supervise PhD students for only 2 years, but still, yeah, file for grants and whatnot. I think if you work in such a group as a PhD student, it's very difficult to do something by itself. So what I would recommend is to file those complaints. Informal or formal, that's up to you, because it depends on how the institution addresses those complaints. If the university actively mentions they cannot do something against those professors, yeah, then I think the PhD students, they do have a problem. What could help is, before you start a PhD at a certain professor, is try to contact PhD students in their lab and see how it is to work in their lab. A professor can have maybe the biggest nature and science publications, but working in his or her lab might be a living hell. So then what I could recommend is, if you're going to look for another position, either you start as a PhD student or you look for another position as postdoc, is contact the people actually working with the professor.
Yeah, I had a friend, actually a colleague, who did that before, but the previous lab members did not say anything about it. But they got on later and they said we couldn't tell you about it. So it's not always, unfortunately, the case. There's a lot of fear in academia.
Yeah, there's a fear of retaliation, because they also don't want to harm their own academic career.
Yeah.
So that exactly shows why it's a systemic issue.
Yeah. We still have a couple of questions. Let's see how much we can catch of those. So in many countries, there are already scores and grades for professors, not only for their publication record, but also for their handling their PhD students. Do you think this will be helpful?
Definitely. Now the scores, they should also do something with the scores, right? So the scores should also been taken to, for example, the HR committee. So, for example, if after, let's say, 5 years, you have an evaluation or an official evaluation, the score you get on your leadership skills should also be taken into account. But to know that, or to know how good a supervisor or a PI manages his or her team, you need to ask the PhD students and the postdocs. Many institutions these days, they rely on self-reporting. So they basically, at the HR committee, they ask the supervisor, they ask the PI, so what do you do to be a good manager? But that is never checked with the lab. And that is also crucial, that these feedback, that is bi-directional feedback, and that information is taken into account.
Yeah, here we have an interesting question. Can AI be used to detect patterns in this? Is in the regards of HR being able to step in earlier for them to actually detect misconduct? Sorry, still, I think the question is still goes on. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So at the University of Athens, I went to design courses for academics about research integrity, including topics of transgressive behaviors. Is there a free source to tap in to help people like collecting material and not having to reinvent the wheels? Same goes for leadership training, etc. How much do you think country culture factors go into this? In general, academia is quite international, but of course, the country still changes the at our workplace. So does this happen more commonly in certain countries? And what do you think about that?
Okay, these were like many questions, right? I'll start with the latter. I think if you move abroad, and especially if you move abroad to like where it's a completely different working culture, yeah, then I do think you're more vulnerable, because I don't think well, it's not just me who thinks that, but it has been shown that these students, PhD students, are more suffering from this transgressive behavior. So this goes indeed across all countries. It's not something that happens only in Belgium. I mean, I think to answer your first question, can AI help with this? Probably, but then there's a question like, how do we handle this with GDPR, right? So will all these complaints go into a system? Probably, but I haven't really thought about how it would help, actually. So how we did this is we did qualitative research. So we took notes during the roundtable conversations, and then we tried to basically code and try to find the red lines, or like the big lines in those stories.
Okay.
But if you can repeat the other sub questions, because I
oh yeah, sorry about that. I
addressed
think
all
I
of them.
confused them. Yeah, so the first one is just like AI to detect patterns in this. So this is the first one, and then where the University of Athens, they wanted to ask about resources, including topics of like the transgressive behavior. Is there a free source to tap in to help people like collecting materials?
I mean, there are many training programs who provide such training, but it's always against payment. What I would think is important, like I think that the big lines in what I presented over here, most of them, like some of them, are probably a problem at your institution. So what I would recommend, if University of Athens think there's a systemic issue there, ask PhD students, ask postdocs, collect your own data and analyze it. And we provided here 14 recommendations from our perspective. Are these the best? I can't tell. So I'm not sure. I'm not aware of any present courses on this, but these were recommendations that we as ECRs felt that could help us a lot.
I think this is a very sensitive topic that everyone is very interested in. We have still, many people who are very curious about different stuff. So there's a question on like how to work around the dean of the faculty allowing her PhD student to exercise transgressive behavior against you, while your supervisor, whose line manager is the aforementioned dean, tells you you have to live with that and it's not worth complaining.
Yeah, that's a big problem, right?
Fortunately.
Now, yeah, definitely, unfortunately. See, that is why it's important that these issues are tackled from the top of the university. So the faculty, the PIs, they can have this academic freedom, but you're still employees from the university. And if the university punishes that behavior, and that if they punish that behavior, then there should be consequences. And it should not matter whether you're a bachelor student or a dean. that behavior cannot be allowed from anyone at university, or should not be allowed from anyone at university.
So related to this question, there's another one that do you think that any of these measures would actually change behavior, or maybe perhaps just push certain PIs to go to another institute where their behavior is more acceptable?
I think when you have tenure at university, I mean, you must, if the university tells you, look, we have seen this issue, let's try to change it. I think you must be like a really bad person in general to then just say screw it and move on. And if they want to move to another university, sure, let them move, but it's not at your university. But that's also why one of the things I think is very important. Everybody should address this. Like, this is not only against university thing. This is not only something in Belgium. This happens at, I can't say all academic institutions, but at a very big majority of them, there are similar issues. So let's change it all together.
I think this is what we all hope for. Yeah, but unfortunately, we don't live in an ideal world, right? Yeah, there's just one last comment. Yeah, from someone who mentioned. Comment on to ask members in the group for feedback about PI. An idea would be to ask a former member that they might be nor be afraid to speak the truth. So is this the way? Yeah.
That's a very good solution.
Yeah.
Ask former members because they don't have this fear of retaliation, because they already left the group. But even then, right? So imagine, okay, let's talk about our field. We're all in proteomics. If you're in a big fight with your former boss, because you talk badly about him or her, then that still might impact your career. So it's never a guarantee, but yeah, I think most likely your chances will be bigger to have an honest opinion about the former PI than about the current PI.
Yeah, especially if like one day you need to go back to them to ask for endorsement for your new job or something that,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, we just reached the time, and yeah, there have been already loads of questions, but I think it's just because everyone was very interested and they found yeah, great stuff in your topic that we could all relate to, perhaps, or at least maybe we know someone that could relate to, hopefully not many of us. Yeah, and yeah, we would like to thank you so much for the great talk and for answering the questions. Yeah, and also the audience
for the,
it was
a bit helpful as well.
Definitely it was. I mean, yeah, you've seen the interaction. Everyone was just like quite curious. So yeah. So thank you so much. And yeah, thanks everyone, and have a great rest of the day.